Within the cold stone walls and shadowed corridors of Buckingham Palace, an unfamiliar wind is stirring, and it's not the damp chill of London's endless rain. In the wake of Queen Elizabeth II's death, a monarch who stood as the nation's anchor for over 7 decades, King Charles III took his place upon the throne. Yet before the crown could settle, illness struck. His battle with cancer has forced him to retreat from much of his public role, leaving behind a rare and unsettling power vacuum in the modern history of the monarchy. On paper, Camilla is Queen Consort, the steadfast companion who has stood by Charles for decades. But beyond the gilded gates, in café, in tabloid headlines, and across the restless chatter of social media, her image still cannot escape the long shadow of a troubled past. The story of Princess Diana, for many in Britain, it is not just an old chapter. It's a wound that has never truly healed. Now, the royal family faces not only the uncertainty of the king's health, but a crisis of public faith. And as Camilla struggles to solidify her place, behind closed doors, another figure is quietly stepping into the light, a presence with the power to shift the balance, and perhaps rewrite the entire story of the monarchy's future. For all her titles and decades of loyalty, Camilla has never quite captured the nation's heart. There is a formality to her public image, an invisible barrier between herself and the people she represents. Crowds greet her with polite applause. The press records her engagements with respectful precision, yet the warmth that cements a monarch's place in the public imagination remains elusive. She is acknowledged, even respected, but rarely loved. And in the monarchy, where emotion can be as vital as protocol, that absence is no small matter. The shadow of Diana lingers like a ghost in the palace halls, unseen but deeply felt. Every balcony appearance, every jewel of the crown she wears, for some, is not a symbol of continuity, but a reminder of the woman they lost and the fairy tale that fractured. Decades have softened the scandal, but not erased it. The public narrative, carefully shaped by years of tabloid headlines and Diana's own candid confessions, cast Camilla in the role of the interloper, the other woman in a love story that ended in tragedy. And though the years have granted her acceptance, they have not offered absolution. The ghost of Diana still walks beside her, uninvited, in every public moment. Perhaps most crucially, Camilla's role was never meant to be that of a leader. She was chosen as Charles's companion, his anchor in private life, not as the face to guide the monarchy into a new era. Her strength lies in support, in stability, in standing quietly beside the king. Yet now, with Charles's health uncertain and the future of the monarchy under scrutiny, that structure feels fragile. The crown needs more than a steady presence. It needs a figure who can unite the institution and the public. A lightning rod for loyalty and hope, and for all her composure and diligence. Camilla has not become that figure. The stage demands a central force, but she was never cast in that role. Then came Catherine's absence, a silence that, rather than diminishing her, seemed only to deepen the public's affection. It began quietly, with vague reports about her health, and a sudden withdrawal from the constant rhythm of royal duties. At first, there was concern. Then came curiosity, and slowly, in the vacuum of her presence, something remarkable happened. The nation began to realize just how much they missed her. In an era where public figures are often overexposed, Catherine's retreat felt almost regal in itself, dignified, private, and untouched by the frantic noise of the news cycle. Each day without her became a subtle reminder of the unique space she occupied in the collective heart of the nation. A space no other member of the royal family could fill. So when she returned, it was not just a reappearance, it was an event. The images from her first engagements back in the public eye traveled fast and far. She stepped into the spotlight not with fanfare or theatrics, but with the quiet authority of someone who understood the weight of the moment. Her posture was straight, her voice steady, her smile warm but measured. There was no hint of haste in her return. It was deliberate, calculated, and deeply confident. It was as though her absence had been a carefully composed prelude to this act. And now she was stepping into a role that had been waiting for her all along. Her work reflected that shift in stature. Catherine did not simply resume her patronages. She elevated them. The Shaping Us campaign, her flagship initiative, was no longer just a project about early childhood development. It became a national conversation, one that linked the emotional and cognitive well-being of the next generation to the health of the nation itself. She spoke of mental health, not as a distant advocate, but as a mother, a daughter, and a woman who understood its quiet devastations. Her engagements in education were not ceremonial checkboxes, they were strategic moves, pulling the monarchy into direct relevance in 21st century issues. And the public, weary of platitudes, recognized the difference. It was in these moments that Catherine's connection to Diana became impossible to ignore. Not because she mirrored her, if anything. She avoided the trap of imitation. But because she seemed to carry forward the essence of what Diana had represented: compassion without spectacle, approachability without compromise, modernity without discarding tradition. She could kneel to speak to a child with the same ease as she could stand in front of global leaders and command the room. In her, people saw a royal figure who was both aspirational and relatable, someone who could navigate the rigid protocols of monarchy while still feeling rooted in the real world. And perhaps most importantly, she did it all without drama. There were no whispered feuds, no personal scandals, no moments where the headlines outshone the work itself. Catherine's power was in her steadiness, her refusal to be pulled into the gravitational chaos that has swallowed others before her. It was a form of strength that felt rare, especially in the modern monarchy, and it made her rise not just a matter of popularity, but of inevitability. By the time the public realized she had stepped into a central role, she was already there, shaping the narrative, the institution, and perhaps the very definition of what it means to be a queen in the 21st century. Behind the gilded doors of Buckingham Palace, away from the flash of cameras and the orchestrated public smiles, King Charles began to play a far subtler game than any coronation or proclamation could reveal. He is, by nature, a man of tradition, but also a pragmatist who understands the fragility of the monarchy in the modern age. And as his own health began to shadow his reign, he seemed to recognize a truth that perhaps only a monarch with decades of waiting behind him could see: that survival would not be secured by rigid adherence to protocol, but by placing the right figure at the emotional center of the crown. That figure, he knew, was not Camilla. It was Catherine. So, the shift began quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. Engagements that once would have been shared between the king and queen consort began to feature Catherine and William instead. International tours, high-profile charity galas, and diplomatic receptions, events that shape not just headlines but the image of the monarchy itself, were subtly redirected. Camilla still appeared at ceremonies steeped in tradition, still presided over certain patronages. But the gravitational pull of influence was no longer in her orbit. It was moving toward the Princess of Wales. And the beauty or danger of this strategy was in its subtlety. There were no announcements, no official demotions, just a gradual reweighting of the scales until the balance was undeniable. Inside palace strategy rooms, the conversation shifted. Advisors who once reported to Clarence House now found themselves consulting with Kensington Palace, decisions about which causes to highlight, which public moments to seize, were increasingly shaped by Catherine's priorities. Her style, her vision for a monarchy that was both rooted in history and alert to the present. Charles allowed it, perhaps even encouraged it, not because he had lost faith in Camilla, but because he understood that the monarchy's future could not rest on her shoulders alone. To the public, the optics spoke volumes. In photos, Catherine no longer appeared as a supporting figure standing a step behind. She was centered, commanding the frame, her presence radiating both authority and warmth. In joint appearances with William, she wasn't just the consort, she was the co-anchor, the one who bridged the gap between the institution and its people. And as this image solidified, it became harder to remember a time when she wasn't the natural face of the monarchy's forward-looking narrative. For Camilla, the change was both gentle and unrelenting. Her role, though still dignified, became increasingly ceremonial. She remained at the king's side for key occasions, but her influence over the direction of the monarchy's public identity diminished with each passing season. It was not a humiliation, nor a coup. It was a quiet recalibration, a strategic repositioning that left her respected, but no longer essential to the crown's long-term survival. By placing William and Catherine at the heart of the royal brand, Charles was ensuring that the monarchy's image would outlive his reign. It was, in its own way, an act of preservation, passing the torch without the spectacle of abdication, securing continuity not through decree, but through the steady realignment of public perception. In this, Charles was less a fading king than a careful steward, preparing the stage so that when history turned its page, the next chapter would begin seamlessly, with the right characters already in place at the very center of the story. When Camilla steps into a room, she carries with her the weight of centuries of royal tradition. Her demeanor is deliberate, her posture impeccable, her every gesture polished by decades of aristocratic etiquette. She is the embodiment of the old-school formal, measured, careful not to stray beyond the well-defined lines of protocol. It is a style that commands respect, but it also maintains distance. For many, she is a figure to be acknowledged rather than embraced, a presence they observe rather than connect with. Her public appearances feel like extensions of the monarchy's ceremonial machinery, flawless in execution, but rarely infused with the kind of warmth that lingers in memory. Catherine, by contrast, moves within those same spaces with a different kind of gravity. She bows to tradition, yes, but she bends it just enough to make it feel alive. Her interactions are less about fulfilling a role and more about engaging with the moment in front of her. She leans in when speaking to someone, makes eye contact that feels personal, laughs without checking for the cameras first. She can go from sharing a quiet joke with a veteran to kneeling in the mud to greet a child, without a hint of calculation in her face. It is this ability to dissolve the invisible barrier between the crown and the crowd that has made her not just a royal figure, but a relatable one. She doesn't simply appear, she connects. The public has noticed, in the slow, unspoken referendum that is public sentiment, Catherine has been crowned long before any coronation. Her name is met with genuine smiles. Her initiatives spark real engagement, and her image, polished yet approachable, has become a symbol of what the monarchy could be in the modern age. Many now refer to her as the Silent Queen, a title born not from ambition but from the quiet inevitability of her rise. She has earned it not by demanding the spotlight, but by becoming the one figure the nation instinctively looks to when it needs reassurance, unity, or hope. Yet not everyone is swept away by the tide. Among the loyalists to Camilla, there is a simmering sense of injustice. They argue that she has endured decades of scrutiny and hostility, stood steadfast beside Charles through personal and political storms, and worked diligently for her causes, only to be edged into the background now that the public mood has shifted. To them, the shift toward Catherine is less a natural evolution and more a popularity contest, one that undervalues loyalty in favor of optics. Observers within and beyond Britain, however, see something more fundamental taking place. They call it a quiet redefinition of the monarchy's currency from hierarchy to humanity, from inherited rank to earned connection. In their eyes, this is not about discarding tradition, but about layering it with something the institution has too often lacked: genuine emotional resonance. The days when a monarch could rely solely on lineage and ceremony are fading. In their place is a new expectation that the crown must feel as well as rule. And in this evolving landscape, Catherine is not just surviving, she is shaping the very mold the modern monarchy will be cast in. This is not the stuff of palace coups. No slammed doors in gilded corridors. No whispered conspiracies, plotting in the dead of night. It is, instead, the kind of shift that the British monarchy has perfected over centuries, a transition so understated that it almost feels like it has always been this way. The power transfer is not written into law or announced from a balcony. It is woven quietly into the fabric of public life, until the new order becomes the only one people remember. And at the center of this recalibration is Catherine, the figure who carries not only the approval of the nation, but its trust, its affection, and its belief that she represents the kind of monarchy that might still matter in the 21st century. Charles, ever the strategist, has allowed this to happen with a careful hand. To the casual observer, nothing appears out of place. Camilla still walks beside him at state occasions, still wears the crown, still sits at his side in official portraits. But look closer, and the shifts are unmistakable. The high-profile causes, the globally televised events, the diplomatic touchpoints that define the monarchy's relevance, they are increasingly shaped, fronted, or entirely owned by Catherine. It is not that Camilla has been stripped of her duties. Rather, her duties have been reframed. She now embodies continuity for the present. While Catherine embodies promise for the future, this approach is deliberate because the monarchy's survival depends on more than just ceremonial stability. It depends on emotional succession. The institution cannot simply pass on the crown. It must pass on the loyalty that sustains it. In this respect, Catherine is the most valuable asset the House of Windsor possesses. She bridges the divide between tradition and modern sensibility, presenting a monarchy that feels both familiar and renewed. For a public increasingly skeptical of inherited privilege, she is the exception they are willing to make. To the royal, they feel they know and would choose, even if choice were an option. Within the palace, this soft handover is discussed not in terms of titles, but in terms of positioning. The language is one of optics, narrative, and long-term engagement. Every photograph, every headline, every carefully chosen appearance is a move in a larger game. The slow, graceful placing of Catherine in the exact spot where, one day, she will need to stand without hesitation. It is not an abrupt coronation, it is a gradual coronation of perception. And once public perception crowns someone, no official ceremony can undo it. By making this shift quietly, without fanfare or confrontation, Charles preserves unity both inside the family and in the public eye. Camilla remains respected. The monarchy avoids scandal. And Catherine rises without a single step that could be read as ambition or opportunism. It is, in the purest sense, a royal solution to a royal problem, elegant, discreet, and entirely on the monarchy's own terms. But make no mistake, beneath that veneer of continuity lies a reordering of power that could define the institution for decades to come.